All right, looks like we have everyone logged on that I can see. A whole bunch of people came in that last minute. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining today's webinar, Deep Dive into Disposition. We're excited that everybody could join today, and we hope everybody is staying safe and healthy. The first thing I always like to do is just introduce our speakers. My name is Shayna Horka, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at Gimel. And I'm joined here today by Senior Sales Engineer Russ Savvy.
Hello, everyone.
And now before we get started, I just want to go over the flow of this webinar. It's a little bit different than what we normally do. It's a shorter, more focused webinar, so we can really get into the nitty-gritty of all things disposition. There are going to be a couple of poll questions towards the end, so if you guys keep an eye out for those and participate, and then we'll go over the results as a group. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the Q&A section on your screen. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please shoot us a message and let us know so we can help you through those. And now before I hand it over to Russ, I have just one slide here to tell you a little bit about Gimel. Gimel is a records, information management, and governance software company that was founded in 2002. We have a client success team and global network of partners that have been delivering solutions with us for more than 17 years. Our primary technology partners are Microsoft and SAP. And our implementation partners include small specialty SIs with specific areas of expertise, as well as larger global SIs and consultants like PwC and Lockheed Martin. Gimel's product suite includes document management for SAP solutions, content governance for SharePoint, and records management. And our family of software products really work together to help you create an efficient digital workplace. Now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Russ so he can go ahead and get started with your presentation.
Thanks, Shayna. Just have a few slides that I'm going to go through. Just an overview of some of the talking points. Again, how to comply with your unique business regulations and how to create a defensible disposition process, as well as how automation can assist with disposition. But first, where did my records go? Or in some cases, my records are still here. How can I get rid of these things? Again, regardless, records must be disposed in accordance with approved retention schedules. While records should not be destroyed when there is still a need for them, it's also important not to keep your records longer than necessary. To minimize storage costs, enhance retrieval efficiency, and/or comply with legal regulations and directives. We will be discussing how to create a defensible destruction plan through automation. So how to comply with your unique business regulations. Again, a lot of this is understanding why you need to take action, find out what information you have, understanding the value of your information, and disposing of information you no longer need. So at a very high level with dealing with your unique business regulations, we have to look at where your records are from a repository standpoint, and where do you store your records, security permissions. All this plays into again, regulations that you may be facing today, and of course, how you can search and locate your records based on the repositories that you're utilizing today. Your retention schedule, again, determines how long you keep things for. And again, we'll be getting a little bit more into this around, a demonstration closer to the end, but what are your retention requirements? Again, a lot of times we see date-based retentions based on limitations of your repository, such as by create date or last modified, but a lot of times, your requirements dig a bit deeper here, as far as sometimes your records need to be managed by events, such as a contract end date or file close date, employee separation. Do you manage your retention schedule? Do you need to manage your records as a case, as a group, such as by grouping them together, such as employee files or project files? So again, your retention schedule and how long you keep it for should also play into where you're actually storing your records, and if your repository is able to maintain these retention schedules based on the limitations, potential limitations of your repositories where you're storing these files. And then what is your disposition process? Again, this could be manual or it could be automated. But again, do you require approval for disposition? Again, back in our physical record days paper, again, this was pretty much how we went through a formal approval process to disposition these records. But when it comes to electronic and the number of records that we're dealing with on a annual basis, does this make sense to still go through an approval process? And again, part of the disposition requirements, do you require transferring records before disposition occurs? So again, all of these tie into your unique business regulations, and if your repositories are up to par, and if you're able to maintain your retention schedules and ultimately your disposition process itself. Creating a defensible destruction plan. Again, some high-level points. Again, as you destroy or disposition your records, we also want to make sure that you can build a defensible destruction plan. And some of these areas and some of these items, again, record declaration. What I mean by this is do you have the ability to declare an item as a record? In other words, locking it down so that you can ensure that over the life cycle of that record, it cannot be modified or deleted. So again, record declaration, immutability is key, where you have to ensure that items can't be deleted or changed over the course of the life cycle. Notifications, again, if your disposition process, you require prior approvals, notifications, again, for notifying folks when records are up for disposition. And again, that ability to support, in your case, if you have multiple approvals that you have to go through, ensuring that you have a way, either manually or automated, that this notification process, you can ensure that all approvals take place prior to the actual disposition of a record. Audit trails, very important. Again, being able to see not only when something is up for, a record is up for disposition, but over the course of the life cycle to, as a records manager, looking at the audit trail, ensuring that from the point of capture, just being able to ensure what's happened over the course to that record over time, that you're able to see that, track that, report on it at any point in time based on an audit trail. Again, at the point of creation through the disposition process and being able to access that. Destruction certificates, again, key part of when records are dispositioned. Do you have proof of what records you have destroyed? So a destruction certificate can serve as a receipt to prove that a record was destroyed. And of course, reports are even better, because again, if you have the ability to report on your destruction certificates, you can prove when you deleted files, on what day, what time, to prove that that destruction did take place. And of course, reports are always key, as again, as you can report on things like disposition reports, audit reports, retention schedules, reporting on phases of where your records are in the life cycle process. Real-time reports, again, assist in creating a defensible destruction plan so that you can know ahead of time when records are up for disposition. Go to my next slide here. And how automation can assist with the disposition process. So this is kind of going to be the focus of what I'm going to be demonstrating, as far as if you can add automation to how you capture your records today. So one of these areas is auto classification, and that is the ability to identify records when they are captured at the designated repositories. Again, taking the end user out of the record classification process, not having to rely on end users to classify your records. Automation can also have assist with the lifecycle management. So once a record has been captured, retaining, potentially declaring a record, maintaining that record over the course of its life cycle, maintaining from the point of capture, ability to report on the record during any phase. Again, this can assist with your overall disposition process, because again, that allows us to know a little bit about something at any phase of the record process. Sorry about that. Then, of course, notifications, which I touched on prior. Notifications can be automatically triggered when an upcoming disposition is due. Again, this is, if you can automate this as opposed to working from a manual process, again, this keeps us, if we can fire these notifications off automatically, we can know ahead of time. In addition to the reports, at any time, we can know what's coming up for disposition at the end of the month, at the end of the year, again, allowing business owners enough time to determine if these records can truly be dispositioned. And then, of course, just the disposition itself, automatically deleting records from a repository being managed. Once approvals have been completed, again, dispositions can also occur without approvals, again, depending on the number or if you even require approvals at all. But again, all assist with creating that. Sorry, my slides are going a little crazy here for some reason. I'm going to go back to my automation. Disposition, automatically deleting records from repository being managed once approvals have been completed, which I already touched on. So we're going to go ahead and start with a poll. Again, we have a very short webinar today. We're going to confine this within 30 minutes. So again, taking those points, I was going to walk through a demonstration of those automation points of auto classification, how we can maintain the life cycle of that record, notifying a user when the disposition is upcoming, and ultimately going through a disposition process. So I just had a few poll questions here. You should see those come up on your screen while I get the demonstration ready. And if you could just respond to those poll questions up on the screen, I'll give that a few seconds. And once that vote is done, I can take a look at the answers. Is your disposition process automated or manual? And if you manage that disposition across one or multiple repositories. And once we get the poll results, they should come up on the screen. And once we get those results, we'll go ahead and jump into the demonstration. And do we have those poll results? Still voting? All right, give that a couple more seconds. All right. So the poll results, what we're seeing around disposition process, automated or manual, we're seeing over half as far as running the disposition, or as far as the disposition process is manual. Again, and we're going to show some ways of how automation can assist with that process. And do you manage your disposition across one or more multiple repositories? Again, 72%, quite a few with two or more. And that's typically what we find this day is that most folks are using more than one repository, and having to maintain that across multiple repositories just becomes that much harder. So thank you for those poll results. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demonstration. So here we go. So basically what we're looking at is Gimmel's records management GRM product. And what I'm going to do is run through a couple scenarios of classifying content as it's being uploaded to a designated repository. In my case, I'm going to use SharePoint and file shares. And we're going to show from an end user perspective, just by an end user interacting with a source repository, we're going to perform the first step of automation of auto classifying your content as far as key, as far as this defensible disposition, as far as how we can support that. So what I'm going to do first is, from an end user perspective, I'm just going to go out to a SharePoint site, and I'm going to simply upload a contract to this area. I'm going to take a contract, I'm going to drag it over. And for the disposition of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive the disposition off of a date, because again, your disposition requirements they're not always going to be create date, modified date. They could also be on a contract end date such as this. They could also be on an event. You want to make sure that to add automation, you want to ensure that your repositories can support this, or the records management solution that you're utilizing. In this case, I'm going to select a date in the past so that I can drive a retention period of 3 years from this date, so that we can drive the disposition process to show you what this automation may look like. And I'm going to say give this a title. And based on, again, a user uploading into SharePoint, we're going to show how classification of that content automatically, taking the end user out of that process, just enhances the disposition process in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Again, we brought in the sample contract number 2. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump out to a file share to show something very similar. I'm just simply going to go out to a file share and upload a contract to show, again, how we can capture a different repository, but how we can capture a contract there and perform auto classification on that repository as well. So I'm simply just going to go out to a file share. In this case, I have something in my legal area called contracts, general contracts, and I'm going to just take another contract here, drag it over. So now from an end user perspective, I've interacted with a SharePoint site just by uploading a file. In the file share example, I've uploaded a contract there. We don't want the end users in this case to do anything more, because we're going to add this auto classification behind the scenes using GRM, Gimmel's records management, to take care of this phase. So now I'm going to go back out to GRM. I'm going to refresh my screen. And what we're going to see at this point, the two contracts that I just brought in, contract number 2 from SharePoint, we can see that we've automatically been able to capture this content, tie it back to a record class. We also had the same thing occur on our file system. But drill a little bit deeper and look at the details, we can see that I've been able to tie this automatically back to a record class, all without the end user having to determine what record class this document belonged to. And based on being able to auto classify this content, I'm also going to be able to apply a retention lifecycle. So on successful classification, a retention lifecycle will be applied. I have a couple of different paths as far as what can occur to this particular record. One, if it's a file share, I'm going to declare it automatically so we can take action based on that auto classification. And then I'm going to tie that to a retention. If I have a contract end date, I'm going to add 3 years to it, and then I'm automatically going to dispose of it. If a contract end date is not available, such as a file share, we're somewhat limited on metadata values or date properties, I'm simply going to fall back to the created date plus 3 days in this case, so we can accelerate that process of what the disposition will look like, since we do have a rather short demonstration period today. We want to be able to see that. So again, based on any one of these rules, a contract end date or a create date, I'm going to be able to drive that retention disposition date, all while performing auto classification. Up at the top here. A couple of the other items, and to ensure that we maintain a defensible, defensible destruction, are things like audit trails. So again, we do automatically keep an audit trail, retain an audit trail. So again, if we did have to go back in and report on a particular record, any action that occurred on this information is automatically available based on the auto classification and our ability to automatically maintain an audit trail. So I'm going to give this a second or two. I did process some records earlier. It looks like these two did come in, so it came in rather fast. Again, if I look at the record details after that classification occurs, I should have the retention that has been applied based on the record class legal general contracts where I categorize these records. So as you can see here, the file share, it's automatically taken on that life cycle of the create date plus 3 days. That's effective. My SharePoint example of the contract is slightly different because if you recall, we did add a contract end date. So again, we want to base that retention off of an actual date that we provided. In this case, we see the contract end date plus 3 years, and we see that actual retention doesn't occur for, it does happen because it was in the past where I created that. So that disposition has also been met as well. So again, just recap, uploading the files, we classified, we're maintaining a life cycle. That life cycle period is now up, the disposition period has been met. So now we have in our inbox those items that are now up for disposition via a notification.
Hey, Russ, I have one question here. It has to do with the demo, so I'm just going to interject it while we're still on this screen. There was some confusion about the dialog box that came up while uploading the document to SharePoint. There was a question on, is it injected by a process by the GIML service such that it classifies the record and applies the metadata and retention schedule upon upload?
Great question. So with GRM, what our solution does is we take a manage in place approach. So what that means is as users work with their designated repositories, in our case, we're actually extracting information about that record. We're not updating any metadata directly to the SharePoint example, of course, not the file share example. So I'm just utilizing SharePoint out of the box, and SharePoint, you could be utilizing folders, metadata, content types. Our solution, regardless, we can take advantage of any of those, any way that you've configured SharePoint that you may be utilizing that today. I want to point out we do not add metadata to the SharePoint site at all in that example, and we do not do that with our solution. It's simply using the upload mechanism. I just have to use something called a drop zone to bring that content into SharePoint, and once that was uploaded, GRM was able to crawl that content and pull back any relevant property information and metadata associated with that contract. Were there any other questions, Shayna?
There was a bit of a food for thought question, I think, more. When you were going through the slides previous to the demo, we had a comment that it would seem that approvals are not either or. More valuable records at some defined threshold could require approvals, while perhaps more mundane records with short duration retention requirements could be pre-approved for deletion.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. A lot of times we see short-term records, things that, again, they seem to make up more of the records that are out there that we're managing. So an approval process, in some cases, you would not require, but in some cases of the longer-term records, permanent records, those type things you may want. And again, our solution is flexible. So again, we can support approvals if necessary. In other cases, you would not require approvals based on your underlying requirements.
Thanks, Russ.
Any others?
That is it for right now, but keep the questions coming, guys. We'll go ahead and answer them when we can.
Good deal. Thanks. Just one other area outside the inbox notification reporting, I said was also key with supporting, again, defensible destruction. So the ability to report on any phase during the life cycle. In this case, I'm just going to show a report of items approaching phase expiration for a record class. So before they even show up in the notification inbox, we can also provide ways of viewing files this way as well. So I'm just going to provide a date. Again, this could be at the end of the month. In my case, I'm going to push out this date pretty far since I don't have a lot of records on my demo system. Generating this report, we can see items approaching phase expiration for this particular record class, and we can also export a report out to PDF, Excel, a CSV file if we want to distribute this out to business owners prior to, again, we may not even require approvals as the one question did come up. We may just want to send out a report to say, hey, these items are going to be removed. Say your piece now. Here's a report with the items in your area that are up for disposition. So just another way of providing data, and in some cases, bypassing the approval process through the inbox. You may just want to send out a report to get assurances that it's okay to remove those files. I'm going to go ahead and go through the inbox itself. So again, you can see the inbox in this case through the automation. Again, we've been able to capture the content. Disposition is now, these documents are now available for disposition. We can see the various repositories. SharePoint, I have 2 out in file shares, and you can notice that some have already expired. That date is already passed, where others that are nearing expiration, we note that here based on the create date plus 3 days. And again, you may not require approvals. In my case, I'm going to walk through what this looks like by simply, and again, we can approve, multiple approvals based on your requirements. But again, we also like to see this can also be seamless, where we don't even have to provide an approval before the disposition occurs. So I'm going to go and take a couple of these out of SharePoint. I'm just going to approve and submit it, and I'm the only person in this approval process. And I can do the same for my file shares, but what I'm going to do is generate or approve these records from SharePoint, and then I'm going to go out to the site to show that they've actually been removed. We get a lot of folks that ask, did you actually remove that file from the source repository without picking it up? And the answer is yes, we do have that ability to disposition files, all while not picking up your content and moving it to another repository. We can leave it where it is, manage it from where it's stored. So I'm going to give this a couple seconds, and then what I'm going to do is jump back out to the contracts SharePoint site to show that that has been removed. It may have already been removed. Let me go ahead and jump out there now. So I'm simply going to go to the contracts area. I'm going to refresh my screen, and we can see that those files no longer reside there after I refresh my screen because we had already gone through the approval process. The files are now dispositioned. And what do we do now? Well, as part of that defensible destruction, we can also provide receipts of that destruction after it has occurred in the form of destruction certificates. We can also archive property information in addition to the audit trail history. So again, based on your underlying requirements, if you do require a receipt of some sort, we can provide that as well. I'll give this a second to see if my destruction certificate actually created. Sometimes this takes a minute or two, so I'll give that a couple minutes. I'll go down under the manage area just to see if I have my archive. And that hasn't happened yet either. So what I can do now is, Shana, we can go ahead and open it up for questions, and then I'll check to see after the questions if I've produced a destruction certificate to show that the item, we can see that the item was removed, but I want to show proof and also be able to report on those items that I just removed from SharePoint as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a couple of questions in our Q&A section. The first one is, does the approver have the ability to open the file?
Yes, and part of that approval process, and I can jump into that now, as part of all the details that we provide, one of those is a hyperlink, and a records manager in this case, or an approver, would only be able to view this file if security has been opened up on the underlying repository. So although we provide a link, it doesn't necessarily mean you have access. So if you do, bottom line, if you have access, you would be able to click on the hyperlink and view the actual record itself before going through the disposition process.
All right, the next one is, does your disposition process also transfer records out of your system?
Yes, outside of disposition, we also have a transfer option. So again, we can take actions such as declaring a record, locking it down. We can disposition a record. We also have the ability to transfer. Our transfer supports within repositories. So again, the SharePoint example, I could have transferred that to a centralized location such as a record center. So we do support that transfer, the transfer capability as well.
Got one in the chat box. Does Gimel support federal HSPD 12 compliant credentials or certificates for digitally approving disposals through a review and approval workflow? For example, using a federal smart card for digitally approving disposals.
I may have to get back on that. My initial, I'm going to say yes, because we do support, multi-factor authentication, and part of that in the federal agencies encryption, as making sure you have your CAT card in your machine in order to get that sign on. I'm going to say yes. However, I would like to research that a little further as far as if the record itself is encrypted with those credentials as well. As far as usually we respect how that record or file is stored inside of your designated repository. We're going to be able to manage it. However, it would be good to know if that file, if you're encrypting your data in that underlying repository as well.
And the next one is, would records on litigation hold be affected by disposition trigger?
Yeah, so we have the ability to apply legal holds as well. So based on Gimel, again, applying a legal hold on your content that we're managing, we will treat that as an immutable, declare it as treat it as an immutable file. Disposition will not occur on any file that's on a legal hold, and that goes for any item that we're managing that has not been declared as a record, as well as those items that have been declared a record. So the key thing here is we will lock it down, and disposition will not occur while that legal hold is in place.
And are files sanitized prior to disposition?
Say that one more time, Shana, sorry about that.
Are files sanitized prior to disposition?
The way we disposition our items is we take it as is, how it's stored in this solution. So we don't remove users. Basically, as that file is how it's stored in SharePoint or file shares or any repository that we manage for that matter, we treat it as is. So that disposition, there's going to be no unencryption or no unzipping a file, as we treat it as is, as the repository allows for that file to be stored in that repository.
Well, that's all the questions we have in the chat box right now.
All right, I know we're getting close up onto the hour. It looks like my destruction certificate did not create. We do, however, have that ability to generate destruction certificates. So if I just go back in the past and report on a destruction certificate, I can show you quickly what that looks like. I'm just going to simply go back in a time and date, February 17th. I know this was one of my dates. I'll see if I hit this right. And again, just a sample destruction certificate. I apologize for mine not generating based on my disposition. I was trying to get it all within 30 minutes, but just one of the samples of this is just a disposition report based on some records I destroyed on February 17th. We provide the approval date, who approved it, the link, the identifier based on that source repository, and the disposed date. And that was basically it. If there are no other questions, I just, again, our focus, I wanted to thank everyone for joining the call today. And again, our focus today was on disposition. Shana, I'll go ahead and hand it back off to you.
Sure, thank you. So if you want to bring up that last slide in the PowerPoint, Russ, with our contact information, if anyone has any further questions, feel free to email Russ or myself directly, or if you see the email address on the screen, info@gimel.com, or visit our website right there on the screen as well. And for those of you interested, we're going to send a recording of this webinar to everyone within 24 to 48 hours in your email. So thank you everybody for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.